From Harry Hurley Way in the world's playground to the broadcast pioneers of Philadelphia Hall of Fame.
I want to congratulate my friend, Harry Hurley.
You're about to find out why Harry Hurley has been named to the Talkers Magazine list of the 100 most important talk show hosts in the nation. Live from the studios of Town Square Media in Northfield, it's Hurley in the Morning on WPG Talk Radio 104.1.
Full disclosure, I'm honored to have this interview, but it's not the interview that I was looking forward to because I believe the 8 years of progress under Governor Chris Christie have been nothing short of extraordinary. And because the media being, as biased as they are, there has not been a fair account of all that has taken place over the past 8 years. We have the privilege, I consider it an exclusive because the governor left office exactly 19 hours ago when he became the first New Jersey governor in 28 years to serve 2 complete terms. Joining us now is my friend, the 55th governor of the state of New Jersey, Governor Christie. Well. Look at this.
Well, good morning, Harry, and to all your listeners. How are you this morning?
I am very well, and I think a big question to you is, how are you doing? This must be very strange, different, however you want to phrase it, because for the past 8 years, since you won the office November 3rd, 2009, defeating the then-incumbent John Corzine, you were preparing to become the 55th governor. And for the past 8 years, you've been the governor, and then suddenly you're not. How are things?
Things are great. Listen, this is the way democracy works and the way it should work. The people of New Jersey honored me with 8 years as their governor, 2 terms. The most they can give anyone consecutively. And while it is always going to be strange to go through a transition like this after 8 years of putting, your heart and soul into the job, fact is this is the way it works. And so I sat and watched Phil Murphy become the 56th governor of New Jersey yesterday at noontime, and Mary Pat and I were on the stage watching. And then, we came home as private citizens.
Did it feel strange?
Sure. When you've put everything you can into a job and been so identified with it, it definitely is a strange feeling, but it's not a bad feeling. I mean, the fact is that we worked as hard as we could, and 8 years is a long time, and we're happy with what we've done. We're satisfied with the job that we did, and now it's time to give someone else a chance and time for us to move on. And so that's the way our democracy works. And listen, I think George Washington, all those many years ago, there was some genius to what he decided to do on his own by deciding after 8 years to stop. And I don't know how he made that decision. No one will ever be able to get inside of his head, obviously. But fact is that 8 years is a long time, and I think, Washington set a good example for all of us.
Governor Christie, let me not go a step further without thanking you for your loyal friendship and your working partnership over the past 8 years. You know what it's meant to me, and I just wanted to say it publicly. It's been a great experience.
Well, thank you. And thank you always for giving me an opportunity to have a forum here on your show to be able to talk about all the different issues that we dealt with over the last 8 years, and to always get a fair shake and the ability to be able to put, my thoughts and views out there for the people, the millions of people who listen to you.
Governor, thank you for that. And through both the spoken and written word, I have said many times that you are, and now I have to say in the past tense, you were a consequential governor. What do you believe are some of your most significant achievements?
Well, I think first, the recovery from Superstorm Sandy has been an extraordinary accomplishment. We've done it in, half the time that, folks in Mississippi and Louisiana recovered from Katrina. We've done it in a way that is outpacing by a good amount the state of New York. And while it's not all done yet, after 5 years, I think we've gotten the lion's share of it done. The 2% property tax cap was very significant. If you look at it, this property tax statistics just came out for 2017. Property taxes in New Jersey went up an average of 1.6%. And I want everybody to remember, when we got into office, property taxes had gone up 7% a year for the last 10 years. And so this was something we thought would work. It did work. We're upset and concerned that the 2% cap on police and fire arbitration awards has been allowed to be expired by the Democratic legislature and by our new governor, but we're hopeful that, they'll reconsider that decision because it's very, very important in terms of keeping property taxes in New Jersey under control. Our pension and benefit reforms in 2011, which is saving the state $120 billion over the next 30 years, very important. And if we hadn't done that, Harry, quite frankly, the pension system would be broke already. Restructuring our higher education system in the state to strengthen Rutgers and to strengthen Rowan has led to enormous growth in both schools in the last number of years, and we're incredibly proud of that. Criminal justice reform to give people a true second chance, and also to keep violent criminals off the streets prior to their trials. It's something that's made the state both fairer and safer. And there's lots more to talk about too, but we could start with those, and there's a lot more to talk about.
How are you going to process, and you have to, this is new to you, now being the immediate past governor. It's snowing in your area. There'll be bad weathers. There'll be, bad weather in the future, hopefully not a Superstorm Sandy. And I'm going to get into that a little later in the hour with you, Governor, because I do believe your leadership during that was extraordinary, and I want to talk a bit about that. But now you don't have to worry about snow or wind or rain or derechos or superstorms. That's something that for now, we don't know what the future holds. We'll talk about it later. But private citizen Christie, it's a little bit different for you, isn't it, after decades of public service?
It is. Listen, I got a call this morning at 4:20, which, it would not be unusual during the time I've been governor. And I, woke up and rolled over to answer the phone, and it was actually our daughter's school telling us that school was canceled this morning. So your responsibilities turn from, not just from the whole state, just to being a parent. And so, today I just have to make sure the driveway is clear rather than worrying about all the roads across New Jersey. So it is a change, and I will miss being in the middle of all of the important things that are happening in the state. And I think that's one of the things that I'll miss the most. But you also know that during the time you've been here, you've been in the middle of those things. You've done the best you could. And it's time the people have decided to give someone else a chance. And quite frankly, they couldn't have given me another chance if they wanted to. So, you get used to that part of it. But certainly it's unusual this morning to be looking outside. And there's a good amount of snow up here in the northern part of the state, Harry, and it's still snowing now. To not have to be on an emergency call with the state police and the Department of Transportation, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Board of Public Utilities about power outages. It's unusual not to have to be on that call because I've been on it for 8 years, and we've overseen more disaster declarations than any governor in modern history. So it's been a lot of what we've had to do in the last 8 years. Governor,
is the official Great Blue Fleece, is it hermetically sealed and on its way to the Smithsonian Institution?
Smithsonian hasn't asked for it, Harry, but it's hanging in the closet. We break it out only in case of significant emergency. But the Blue Fleece actually was given to me, and I don't know whether I've ever talked to you about this on the air, but the Blue Fleece was given to me on the day after the election in November 4th of 2009. My first visit as governor-elect was to the Robert Treat Academy, a charter school in Newark, New Jersey, and it was given to me by longtime Democratic political boss Steve Adubato Sr.
Wow, legend!
And when I arrived there, Steve said, "You know how much confidence I had in the fact you were going to win?" And I said, "No, Steve, how much?" He said, "Well, I got this made," and he pulled out from underneath the conference table where we were in a plastic bag. This blue fleece that said Governor Chris Christie. And I said, I'm sure you have one made up for Corzine, too, knowing Steve. But the fact is that we got the fleece from Steve. And I will tell you that it's very coincidental that I wound up wearing it at all. We were rushing to leave on the day of Hurricane Sandy from our house up in the northern part of the state to move down to the governor's mansion where we were going to manage the storm from, Mary Pat and me and all the children. And I was looking for something to wear, and I just went in the closet and I saw that, and I said, all right, well, I'll just grab this. So there was no great plan to it. And as it turned out, I wound up wearing it every day in the beginning because I had nothing else to wear.
Became legendary.
Yes. And had Bobby Moynihan on Saturday Night Live wearing one of the fleeces and portraying me on Saturday Night Live. So it did become famous. But as with many things that become famous, it began inadvertently.
I love it. That's a great story. We have breaking news on Hurley in the Morning. We cracked the caper of the great blue fleece of Governor Christie. Many times in life, the people that deserve credit don't get the credit. People who don't deserve credit get the credit. And it's not really a question about, boo-hoo, boo-hoo, you didn't get credit because you do the right thing and you let the chips fall where they may. But I remember breaking the news that you were going to be nominating, thereby appointing Damon Tyner to be the prosecutor in Atlantic County. And a lot of people were like crying, oh, he's crossing party lines. He's nominating a Democrat. Not just to support you blindly. I thought it was a brilliant appointment. As you know, I wrote a lengthy column about your appointment of Damon Tyner. I said what a great job he was going to do. I said he will solve the April Kaufman murder case that had turned 5+ years into a very, very persistent cold case. He solved it lickety-split. I know the trials have to take place, but he has solved the case. I want to congratulate you for showing your ability for the past 8 years, no matter what the occasion, whether it was education reform with Senate President Sweeney and then, Speaker Prieto and the Democratic legislature, or crossing party lines to nominate a good man in Damon Tyner to be Atlantic County prosecutor. And it's not an accident, sir, that after 5 years of nothing, the case is suddenly solved. The only difference, he's in there.
Well, listen, I think everyone here from our party has to remember that we're a Democratic state. Where we have, a huge disparity, almost 2-to-1 of registered Democrats to Republicans, and that for 8 years, every day of the 8 years, 2,920 days to be exact, I had to deal with a Democratic legislature and, most importantly, a Democratic state Senate, and never got to serve with a Republican state senator in District 2, which covers Atlantic County and most of Atlantic County. So the fact is that, you have to make compromises if you want to govern. And what I cared about the most was picking good and qualified people. Now, I had great affection for Prosecutor McClain and obviously made him a Superior Court judge as well, and I think he is and will be an outstanding judge. But when it came time to pick a replacement, I worked hard with the late Senator Whalen and with other constituencies, Republican Chairman Keith Davis and others, to try to come up with a prosecutor who would do a great job and would also be acceptable to all the parties involved. And in the end, I think we found that person in the new prosecutor. And I think his performance over the course of his 5-year term or longer, depending upon the decision of the next governor who has to decide an Atlantic County prosecutor, will absolutely back up the decision that we made. I appointed many more Republicans and Democrats during my time as governor, but with a Democratic state Senate and a Democratic legislature, you better be willing to find people of skill, talent, and goodwill on the other side of the aisle as well, or you're not going to be very effective as governor.
And you do raise a good point about the Democratic senator of the time with senatorial courtesy. So to get one through, it has to be one that everybody can agree on. And I think based on all those parameters, you could not have done better than with Damon. This one is one that I just feel obligated to ask. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but do you have a great disappointment, either something that you wanted to get done that didn't get done, or just a disappointment of any kind during the past 8 years?
Oh, sure. I mean, you have a number of them, right? Because even though I feel like we did so much of what we wanted to do when we won in 2009, I would have loved to have done even more extensive pension and benefit reform. And I think it is the single biggest thing that's holding New Jersey back now. Even with all the reform we did, we still have one of the worst pensions in America for our public sector workers in terms of its funding, despite the fact that I put $8.8 billion in cash into the pension over my 8 years, which is 2.5 times more than the last 5 governors combined put into the pension. Even though we had significant reforms, even though we've now dedicated the lottery proceeds for the next 30 years to the pension system, we're still in a hole. I wish in the second term I could have convinced the Democratic legislature to do another round of significant reforms. We had a bipartisan commission that recommended those things that would have, I think, finally fixed the pension issue. But, there was no desire in the Democratic legislature after the awful abuse that they took from the public sector unions after the first round of pension and benefit reforms for them to do more. Along those lines, I think it's obscene that taxpayers are paying for these huge boat checks for retired police and firefighters who are getting 2, 3, 4. Someone last month in Jersey City got a $510,000 check on their way out the door for unused sick leave. This guy must have never been sick his entire life. He's a medical miracle. I got offered at one point by the legislature a $7,500 cap on that. I wanted zero. I wanted use it or lose it for sick leave, because I figure you should only use sick leave if you're sick, and if you're not sick, that's the reward, not having to get paid for not being sick. I should have taken the $7,500 cap, Harry, because it would have contained it a little bit more, even though I was going for what I thought was the right thing and perfection. I probably shouldn't have let the perfect get in the way of the good. I very rarely did during my term, but on the sick leave cap, that's something that I left on the table that I probably should have taken off the table.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I'd say is that, I had hoped to do even more extensive education reform. Now, listen, we got teacher evaluations for the first time in New Jersey that are meaningful. We got tenure reform that allows school districts, after a couple of years of bad evaluations, to be able to terminate teachers whether they have tenure or not. And we've doubled the number of charter school seats and really restricted that growth to failing school districts, not successful suburban districts. We don't need charter schools there. We need them in the failing districts where children are not getting an opportunity to get a great education. I wish we could have done even more, but again, those fights are tough fights against a union that everybody in your region of the state saw what they were willing to do to another Democrat with what they spent on Steve Sweeney. I'm sure Town Square Media made a lot of money during that campaign, and those are some of the disappointments. But compared to the successes and the joy that the job has brought to me and to my family, they're relatively few compared to the real great things.
19 minutes past the hour, the 55th governor of the state of New Jersey, my good friend, Governor Chris Christie, is here for the full hour, and we are going gavel to gavel uninterrupted. We're calling it the exit interview. Quite an extraordinary 8 years to try to compartmentalize and debrief. What would you miss the most not being governor?
I miss being in the middle of every significant argument in the state. When you're governor of New Jersey, you are the most important elected official in the state, and you are in the middle of every significant argument on public policy and a role to play in every significant argument on public policy in the state. And, Harry, for those people who know me, they know that that's what I love the most. I love being in the middle of the scrum, trying to make things happen, trying to use the power of the office to be able to put forward a good result and to negotiate with folks who are on the other side of the argument to try to get to a place where if everybody doesn't feel like they win, nobody feels like they lost. And I think, Mary Pat and I took our 4 children to see the Broadway show Hamilton during the Christmas holidays. And I thought very much during the scene where Aaron Burr sings the song called The Room Where It Happens about Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and Alexander Hamilton being in the room negotiating the setting up of the financial system in the country in return for moving the nation's capital to Washington, D.C. Burr bemoans not being in the room where it happens. I'll miss being in the room where it happens and being able to affect the debate and to be able to effectuate change. And so I think that'll be the thing that I'll miss the most.
What will you miss the least?
The media, Harry.
Minus me?
Minus you, of course, but the media. Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, and this is not just in New Jersey, although New Jersey, is certainly becoming, unfortunately, a leading practitioner of a media that, and again, this may insult you, Harry, but it doesn't include you, the media is becoming significantly younger, significantly less experienced and nuanced, and they're a blunt instrument and no longer a scalpel. And
so true.
What they want to do is just create controversy, create antagonism, and to tear down those people who put themselves in the position of public office. Now, that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be criticized at times, but I think that the criticism has become increasingly personal and increasingly, without a lot of factual basis, and just a kind of not even a philosophical approach, although there is some liberal bias in the media, but more than that, it's just that they are skeptical and cynical about every person who offers themselves for public office, and their reporting and their editorializing reflects that. And
what I think too, Governor, and I would love your take on this as our former distinguished United States Attorney for the great state of New Jersey, because your record was extraordinary, undefeated record, I might add, of prosecutions and success, gaining convictions. It used to be an allegation, and you can appreciate this as a lawman. The allegation was now your opportunity to ask a jury to let you prove your case that the person that you are saying acted badly is guilty of something, and then the jury decides. The media now alleges, and now allegation equals conviction. It's very dangerous.
It is. It turns our Constitution on its head, and there's no doubt that it affects our justice system, because jurors are no more than regular citizens who are asked to make objective decisions. And I still think it's the best system in the world. But those folks are exposed to media coverage before they ever become jurors on a case, where the media reports it as if when someone says something happened or accuses someone of something, that then all of a sudden they're guilty of those things. And I think, as you said, as a former prosecutor, it was always in front and center for me that the government had the burden to prove people's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The citizen who stands accused has the presumption of innocence. And I said that all along with the Bob Menendez case. And even though I had real concerns about some of the conduct that was alleged in the indictment, the fact of the matter is that I said all along that Senator Menendez had the right to the presumption of innocence.
Mm-hmm. You did.
And, no matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether I agree with you or not, whether you're a prominent public official or a private citizen, you have the right for that. That's part of our Constitution. I think the media is effectively taking that away from folks.
So true. So many people are communicating to me while we do this extraordinary live interview with Governor Christie that want me to do shout-outs. I can't honor them all. Very dear friend of mine, and you know him. He's the president and the chief executive officer of Resorts Casino Hotel in Atlantic City, a good guy who does it the right way. Wanted me to send his best regards to you, Governor Christie, and thank you for everything that you've done.
Absolutely.
Mark
I appreciate
Giantonio.
That. And we've worked very closely with, as you know, with that industry in Atlantic City to begin what the Associated Press, I'm sure you saw this, on New Year's Day, said Atlantic City is poised for a major revival in 2018, and I'm very proud of that, because certainly when I came into office, that's not what people were talking about.
It's true, and we're going to get to that in detail in just a little bit. You're going to love this question because nobody's ever asked you about this before. Regarding the media's obsession, and I would say to try unsuccessfully to directly link you to the so-called Bridgegate. Talk about a phony scandal. I've talked to friends of yours and mine from the other side of the aisle. They still can't believe that they got the mileage out of that. They're like astounded that they got the mileage out of that they did. How did that affect you, your governorship, and your candidacy for president of the United States?
Well, it changed everything, Harry. And let's never forget that this, story broke about 2 weeks after there was a national poll that showed me beating Hillary Clinton nationally. And I don't think people can ever forget that context. I had now proven to be a demonstrable threat to the idea that Hillary Clinton was inevitably going to be the next president of the United States.
So they had to put a stop to you then.
Yes, sir. And, fact is that what happened up there at Fort Lee at the George Washington Bridge, I don't think we'll all ever know exactly what the motivation was and what happened. But in the end, it was a stunt, a immature, ridiculous stunt for the people who were involved. They deserve to be fired and embarrassed publicly and never allowed to work in government again. But, I had no idea what was going on. They went through an entire trial. No one ever accused me of knowing that there was anything going on here or that there was any political motivation for what was going on, if in fact that's why they did what they did. But there became a complete media obsession. And I know I spoke to another one of your colleagues, Michael Aaron from NJTV, who did an interview with me and admitted himself that he couldn't understand the media obsession with this, except that, as he said, you were the front runner for President of the United States, and I'm convinced that, people wanted to take me down. And there was a lot of pent-up frustration among liberal media and among my Democratic adversaries because the first 4 years had gone so well, and we had gotten 61% of the vote for re-election just a few weeks earlier, and, had really done what we said we were going to do in the state, beaten, a Democrat by 22 points. That, I think, was very, very threatening to people. And so the Democratic National Committee set up shop at the Woodbridge Hilton, and we're running the entire operation, feeding the media for months afterwards. But despite the fact that, despite the fact that we, did an independent investigation, which cleared all the senior people in the administration from any wrongdoing, put that aside because people tried to diminish that report because we had hired the people to do an internal investigation. Well, that's what every major organization in America does. When they have a problem inside their organization, they hire a group of folks to come in and to give them insight into what happened, so that somebody who's not employed by the state can do that. We got criticized for that, but let me remind people that the so-called Mastro report, because it was written by Randy Mastro, a former federal prosecutor, proved to be exactly right. That report concluded that there were three people alone who were involved in this mess at the George Washington Bridge. And those three people were David Wildstein, Bill Baroni, and Bridget Kelly. In the end, the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, with all the power and authority, and believe me, I know it, because I did it for 7 years, the grand jury subpoena authority, search warrant authority, they did a thorough investigation. And the only people that were ever charged were those three people. The legislature, the Democrats in the legislature, ran and had hearings for weeks, as you'll recall, into this issue. They're the only three people that they ever found culpable for what went on. In the end, it was a fake scandal. And it was, something that was done to try to hurt me politically. And quite frankly, Harry, they were successful. And they did hurt me politically. And that's the shame of it for the people in New Jersey and the shame of it for me personally. But you get into this game, and it's a very tough business, and, people don't always act fairly, and that's what you have to put up with.
Here's one that you and I have never had an opportunity on air to discuss. I think we have discussed it off air on one or two occasions. 2012, you were undoubtedly you were the it thing. You were the most celebrated Republican in the country. Everybody loved you. I was at an event with Ann Coulter and a bunch of other people. She said to me, you have to make sure that your friend Governor Christie runs. This was 2012. Everybody wanted Governor Chris Christie to run in 2012. You did something extraordinary that nobody ever does. No, I think I said this to you before. Nobody ever does this. You said you just felt it was too soon. You weren't ready. Any regrets about not running for president in 2012? Myself included, a lot of people believe had you run, you would have become the president.
No, Harry, no regrets. And the reason is that I have too much respect and reverence for the presidency as an institution. And I just didn't believe I was ready to be president. And I don't think you have any business asking people for their money or, even more importantly, for their vote if in your heart you don't believe you're ready. Let's remember, when I had to make that decision, I'd been governor for about 19 months. 19 months. I mean, that is the infancy of a governorship. And before that, I had never held high political office. I'd been a prosecutor. I just didn't believe I was ready to grapple with all of the complex issues that you deal with as the President of the United States, and most particularly in the area of foreign policy, where I've been an interested observer, but certainly had not taken the time that I took later to study it, to meet with experts, to, think and craft my proposals and my ideas about the kind of role that America should play in the world. And so I understand, some people see political opportunity and they find it irresistible, whether or not they're actually qualified and ready to do the job if they win. I made that decision the exact opposite way. I knew that I had political opportunity and significant political opportunity, but I also knew that the worst thing in the world, worse than running for president and losing, is running for president and winning and not being ready to do the job. That's betraying the American people, and that's not something I wanted to be involved in. So, and I also think, Harry, listen, you're right. We were very, very hot politically then across the whole country, but Mitt Romney would have been a formidable opponent in the Republican primary, and I don't know what would have turned out, despite the fact that everybody says, oh, you would have been the nominee, no problem. And then, we haven't defeated many incumbent presidents over the lifetime of this country. Most presidents who have sought a second term have gotten a second term. The overwhelming majority of them have. Now, I'm not saying I know what would have happened. All I'm saying is for all those people who say if you had run in 2012, you would have definitely been president. They don't know what would have happened either. So I leave that with no regrets at all. I made the right decision for me. I made the right decision for the people of New Jersey. Because let's remember this, Harry, one footnote that no one ever talks about. Superstorm Sandy was still coming, whether I decided to run for president or not. And what would it have been like if on October 29th, 2012, I would have been out in Ohio, Wisconsin, one of the big contested states as Superstorm Sandy was coming.
Your objective friends in the news media would have flambéed you on the Barbie.
Well, that's the point, right? I would not have gotten the attention of being the guy who was the governor who was, prepared to protect and save the state after this storm. I would have been called the absentee governor who put his own personal ambition ahead of the health, safety, and welfare of the people of his state.
Or what if I flipped the script, though, and if I could have been your press secretary, but you never asked, if I could have been your press secretary during that campaign, I would have been saying on your behalf, and you would have been saying on your behalf, we suspend Governor Christie's campaign. He's home. He is tending to a significant national emergency, and you get your cake and eat it, too. You do your job at home, and you gain points all over the country because you stayed home.
Well, Harry, that might have played out that way. Let me give you another scenario since we're going to play political what-ifs. You could do that, but then all of those down-ballot candidates in those swing states are going to say, we can't believe that right here near the end, he's not here for the people of our state to see him in a close race against an incumbent president. And remember, it's not a game that you play by yourself. It's ping pong, right? So you're hitting that ball, and that's a very good ball you just hit across the net.
Thank you.
And then Barack Obama is going to hit another ball across the net. And that's not the way my conduct would have been characterized. No matter when I would have suspended the campaign, I believe I would have been characterized as somebody who, had both abandoned the state and abandoned my race. And I think it would have been very tough. So I only raised that issue, Harry, to say to folks, not that it would have been dispositive. Who knows? But that's the point. Who knows? And so I can't live in a state of regret over those decisions. I made the best decisions I could make at the time. I don't regret them. And I felt that my failure to be ready at that early date to run for president and the obligations that I had willingly and voluntarily taken on as governor were more important than me pursuing at that moment my ambition to be president.
Great answer. 36 minutes past the hour. Governor Christie, Hurley in the morning, WPG. One other question about 2012. Then I have one last question about 2016. Then We'll get into some other state issues with Governor Christie until the top of the hour, uninterrupted, and I'm really enjoying it. And incidentally, my sister wrote to me, on the very first day you could have slept in, that you're here, and I want to thank you for that, Governor.
You're welcome, Harry.
You're a good friend. You've always been true to me, and I hope you know that the same can be said for me to you.
Absolutely.
The 2012 campaign, I don't think this was as widely reported as it should have been, and I knew a lot of the Romney people from when he ran before. One of them, Sean Spicer and a few other people that were involved that I talked to. You were Mitt Romney's first choice for vice president. True or false?
I don't know. He never characterized it to me that way. I know.
Did you ever hear that?
I've heard it, but I never heard it directly from Governor Romney. I think I know I was a finalist for the job. We talked significantly about it. But in the end, I think he made the choice that he was most comfortable with and that he thought was best for both his campaign and for the country. And certainly I had no objection to someone like Paul Ryan being selected. And I think when you're in that kind of contest and being considered, it's not something you can campaign for, so you just submit your documentation, you submit the interviews and vetting from the folks in the campaign and the lawyers, and then you wait to see. It would have been an honor to have been selected by Governor Romney to be the vice presidential candidate, and I would have campaigned hard and done what I needed to do. It would have raised very much the same kind of issues in late October, although it would have been less significant to have the vice presidential candidate off the trail to deal with Sandy than it would have been to have the presidential candidate. But I never heard that directly from Governor Romney, so I always am skeptical about those things, Harry. But, listen, think about the incredible honor it is for a guy to even be considered for vice president. And I was in 2012, but I have respect for Governor Romney's decision.
If the fake news market saturation level, nonstop Bridgegate hellstorm had not happened, coupled with the phenomenon that is my former boss, Donald J. Trump, what would 2016 Chris Christie have looked like?
Oh, listen, I think even with Bridgegate, because quite frankly, people around the country didn't care nearly as much about it as people in the four-state area of Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York cared about it. I think we would have been the nominee. I said this in other interviews. I can't tell you how many times Mary Pat went around in New Hampshire going door to door, and people would say to her, "Oh, you're Governor Christie's wife. We love him. He's so straight and honest and blunt and direct. We think he's fabulous. We're voting for Trump, but we love your husband. We hope he makes him vice president or attorney general." It was incredibly frustrating. We did a poll at one point that showed that 38% of Trump voters had us as their second choice. So, I think it would have been an entirely different race, as everybody else, the other 15 candidates, found out without Donald Trump in the race. And I think the president, was an incredibly formidable candidate, but particularly for me, because he occupied the lane that I intended to run in the Republican primary. And I think you saw, Harry, during the debates that in every one of the debates we participated in, we were judged by the pundits as a top three person in debates that involved 10 or 11 people.
That was hard, too, wasn't it? Podiums all over the place and time, and it was crazy, wasn't it?
It was very difficult, but also exhilarating. Yeah. Exhilarating to participate in those debates and also to do as well as we did.
See, to stand out in that crowd, that's the hardest thing to do.
It was very hard, and you had to come up with real strategies to be able to do it with a limited amount of time that you were given as one of the candidates on that stage that wasn't named Donald Trump. And so, all those things are things that are disappointments. But I do believe, and I've said this before, that we would have been the Republican nominee for president if Donald Trump had not run. And if we had been, I think we would have given, Hillary Clinton quite the race.
Oh, there's no question. This is anecdotal, but I almost think it's not. I think it's almost empirical because I heard it everywhere I went. My wife, Margie, who you know, and we went to Alaska on a cruise. We're in Ketchikan. First time I've ever been there. We take a cable car ride up to this incredible area that's cut into a mountain of sorts. So we're taking this cable car ride up there. We get there. There's all these, neat artifacts from long ago. We sign in the ledger, who we are, and our address. So this very nice woman, Native Alaskan, she sees New Jersey, she goes, Governor Chris Christie, he's got to run for president. He's got to run. She was so excited that merely by extension, she didn't even know that we knew each other. When I told her that we were friends, she touched my hand because she wanted to touch the hand that touched Chris Christie. That's a true story. Honestly, so many people wanted you to run both times. All right, so let me go back to yesterday. I don't want to do anything. I said yesterday we have to give our new governor a chance. I know he's going to be very different than you. His philosophical beliefs are very, very different, and he's of the opposite political party. But I said we have to give him a chance because if he succeeds, we all succeed, something that, that I've heard you say. But I did hear one thing during the speech that just rubbed me the wrong way, and I knew I was going to have this opportunity to speak with you, and I could nitpick a lot of things. I loved the Kennedy Bible being there. I loved a lot of it. Loved all the ex-governors, former governors being there. Wish Governor Byrne could have been there. A lot of things to say that I won't get into today. But there was this one item that was said by our new governor. He said that we'll be a stronger and fairer New Jersey. Governor, I pose this to you as if somehow 5 minutes ago we were a weaker and unfair New Jersey. I didn't like that.
Well, listen, that was his campaign slogan, so you had to expect that would be a big theme in his speech. And listen, I wish him the best of luck in doing that. I mean, because as you said, if, in fact, he's able to make New Jersey even stronger than it is now, a state where we went from 10% unemployment to 5% unemployment, where we went from losing 280,000 private sector jobs before I became governor to adding 335,000 private sector jobs. If those things were to occur across the board, that would be great for our state, and I hope that that's what he achieves. And I don't think that you can take those things personally, and I didn't. This was the new governor up there, laying out his hopes, his plans, his aspirations for the state. And so I didn't take any of that as a slight to me. I took it as what he aspires to do in the job. And if he does that, that will be great for me and my family and you and your family as citizens of this state, and it'll be good for the 9 million other people who live here. So, I thought that the governor gave a very hopeful, optimistic speech for the most part yesterday. And now the work comes. Which in New Jersey has always proven to be much, much more difficult than giving a speech.
How would you rate the difference between being the change agent, first term Governor Chris Christie, and I'm taking Bridgegate and some of the other just nonsense out of play, the second term, whether it was Corzine or, nobody in 28 years got through the second term. The second term for a New Jersey governor, because of everything, our unfunded pension liabilities, structural, just everything, everything. The second term seems to be very tough to come out of it looking good. Agree or disagree?
Agree, and it not only applies to New Jersey, it applies to the presidency as well.
Good point.
Very difficult to come out of the presidency looking good after 2 terms, and I think same thing with the governorship because 8 years is a long time. And it was funny, I was reading a Facebook message last night that someone put up that was complimentary of me, and then I made the gross error that we always say we won't do, but we do, is to look at the comments beneath it. And this is kind of indicative of it. One woman wrote, "I voted for him twice. I really loved him in the beginning, but I was tired of him by the time that the 8 years was over, and I don't like him anymore." I just think that's the way it goes. I think for me in particular, Harry, you mentioned this, at the top of the interview, I have been the most prominent Republican voice in this state now for 16 years, and I've been, an incredibly prominent public, voice for folks for 16 years now. That's a long time. That's longer than anybody. You look at any of the other folks who have served in this job, none of them have had one of those statewide jobs for 16 years. And there's only 4 statewide jobs. Governor, now 5 with the lieutenant governor. But you have governor, lieutenant governor, the 2 United States senators, and U.S. attorney. And other than that, every other job is dependent upon the governor. So you're not independent. no one in the history of this state has ever served 16 consecutive years in our 242-year history in those jobs. In fact, there's only one other person who's ever been both U.S. attorney and governor, and that was Garrett Wall in the 1830s. And so the fact is, after 16 years, a lot of people have grown tired of me. I get that, and I understand it. And so second terms make that difficult. That means I'm in year 13 to year 16. And there's some people in the state who are tired of listening. That's okay. I get it. I understand. And I, know that in the sweep of history, when people have some time to look back with some objectivity and without the, heat and passion of the day, I think our record will hold up very, very well. And in fact, lots of people will be saying, gee, we wish he was still here.
I think that is going to be the assessment. It's going to take a little time because there was just so much pile on. And I do agree with the longevity aspect. It's a shame, but they say absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I think when people see the changes that are going to be happening, we're going to hear a different tune being sung. I'm going to be here to have that epiphany with everyone and remind people that, remember what you were saying not long ago. So it's going to be interesting to see that play out, and I think it is going to play out exactly that way. I imagine you were very pleased. I suspect you probably knew, but we didn't know. I was very happy when I heard Governor Murphy, and he did it in such a, I thought, collegial, kind way. I don't like his policies that I've heard, but he's impossible not to like. I consider him a likable, good man. And he looked over at you and he pointed towards you and he said, "Great job, Governor Christie, on opioid abuse and addiction. And you've done a great job with that, and we're going to stay on that. We're going to keep doing that." That was almost verbatim. It was similar to that. And he did it, I thought, very enthusiastically, very authentically, and he showed all of us that he's going to continue what you started. How pleased are you to know that?
Well, it's great. It's great for the people and the families of the state who are suffering. And that's the most important part of it. It's not about me. It's never been about me. It's been about me trying to bring light and heat to that issue because too many of our citizens are dying. And so I thought it was incredibly gracious of the governor to, give me some credit for that. But in the end, the most important thing he said is that, it's a cause worth continuing. And, he'll have a great opportunity as governor to continue, I hope, not only just the areas of treatment and enforcement and other things that we were doing, but also I hope to continue to keep the visibility of the issue high, because if we don't do that, the stigma that's attached to this disease will continue to drive people into the shadows and away from treatment. And we need to get people treated. We need to get them healthy, and we need to stop the dying. So it's a very, very important issue. It's been an important issue to me for over 20 years, and I'm glad that I had the governorship for a period of time to be able to put a spotlight on that.
Governor Christie, in your final days, it's not unusual, lame duck stuff, and particularly outgoing governor and even some people in the legislature that would be leaving. So it's an amazingly, potentially productive time for both good things and who knows what else. But 158 bills, get shipped over to you, and you've got to look at all these things. You wound up signing, I think, 108 or somewhere close to that. One of them that you did not sign, and a lot of people in this area are not happy about it, the Atlantic City Airport Growth Enterprise Zone legislation. And let me raise a name, our mutual friend Denny Levinson, who publicly stated in about the last 24 hours that after you pocket vetoed this, he said, quote, "You went out like a chump," end quote. Your thoughts?
Well, Denny's a colorful guy, and he's got lots of interesting things to say. But I would just say this, Denny has a very parochial, provincial view based upon the parochial, provincial office that he holds. He's the Atlantic County executive, and his only, concern needs to be for Atlantic County. And he's a very effective advocate for that, and for the people who have elected him. And I'm a fan. I like Denny Levinson. He's wrong about the legislation because if it had just concerned the Atlantic City Airport growth zone, I would have signed it. Except what happened was, in the process of legislation, they larded on a number of other towns into that legislation that are North Jersey towns that I just didn't believe were appropriate for that. Because of the short period of time, what I would have normally done in this situation like that would have been to line item veto out in a conditional veto those other towns and allowed Atlantic City to stay. I didn't have that choice because of the 7 days that I had to consider this, and the fact that the legislature would not come back into session to concur with a conditional veto. I had to either sign it and live with all of the other things that were larded into that bill, or to let it go and give them another chance to come back and do it the right way. And I hope that's what they do. I hope they come back and they do it the right way for Atlantic City. But unlike Denny, I can't only be concerned with what happens in Atlantic County. I have to be concerned with the effect that these things have on all 21 counties. And I think the adding of a lot of those other places into the bill made the bill an unacceptable one. And I hope that Senator Brown and others will advocate for a clean bill for the Atlantic City Airport District. Now, I'm sure if Denny were to get on, he'd say, well, he should have just signed it anyway. Well, as governor, you have to make these decisions, and I can't accept, a number of towns being added to this distinction, which adds tax incentives and other costs to the state, if I don't believe that would help those towns to grow economically. And so it would have been wasted money, Harry. And, I vetoed $7.3 billion in wasteful spending over the course of my 8 years. We vetoed over 500 bills and never had one overridden. The largest number of vetoes ever in state history, and the only governor who has left office with not one of those vetoes overridden. And so I understand that Denny's upset and he'd like me not to worry about anything other than Atlantic County. He has that luxury. I don't.
Governor, we mentioned Superstorm Hurricane Sandy in 2012 earlier in our interview, but I really didn't give you an opportunity, because I said we would come back to it later, to talk about how statewide, nationwide, you absolutely, this is not gratuitous. I lived it. We were on the phone all the time, on air, off air a bit. And your handling of Superstorm Hurricane Sandy in 2012, I thought, was extraordinary. And the nation took notice. And of course, we kidded about the iconic blue fleece becoming famous, and it became famous because you were like working it every day. I mean, incredible. What do you have to say about? And I know it's self-assessment is it's not something that you would do if I didn't prod you a little bit. But what's your self-assessment of the leadership that you displayed during the worst storm that we've ever had?
We did the best we could, Harry. I think that's the only honest way to self-assess during Superstorm Sandy. I think no one had ever confronted a storm like this in the history of New Jersey. 365,000 homes destroyed, over 6 million people without power, no water treatment or wastewater treatment plants in the state operational. Very few gas stations opened across the state. All the state's refineries closed. This was a disaster of unprecedented proportion, and there's no blueprint for this. There's nothing in the new governor's manual that they leave you in the top desk drawer, that tells you how to handle something like this. And so me and the extraordinary team that we had put together went about trying to write the book on how you do this. And, I think for the most part we did really well. We made some mistakes too. That's part of the learning process. But what we have done is we now have literally put together a book that we gave to mayors and county officials and to the new governor about all the things that we did and are doing and how we prepared, what we would do differently. And so there's now about a 100-page book that the new governor has, and that, God forbid, I hope he never has to use it, because it is a defining moment in this governorship, and one that dominated my life and Mary Pat, who raised over $40 million for the Hurricane Sandy New Jersey Relief Fund. It dominated our lives, for the better part of a year. And it's been a part of our lives for the last 5. But, I feel like we did the very best we could, and what we cared about the most was getting people's lives returned to some semblance of normalcy. And I think for the overwhelming number of New Jerseyans, that's what we were able to do.
Governor Christie, after years of giving Atlantic City a fair chance, and we could go all the way back, you put in, through leadership, the ability for Atlantic City not to be able to be challenged in terms of gaming only in Atlantic City for that 5-year period. And then, of course, other things that you did to support Atlantic City. After years of giving Atlantic City a fair chance for self-governance, you made the decision that the state would formally take over Atlantic City. How would you rate your efforts?
Well, I would just look at what's happening in Atlantic City. First of all, it was never something I wanted to do. I had no interest in becoming the mayor of Atlantic City, Harry, as much as I love the region and love the town. But
do you have any interest in becoming the mayor of the morning?
No, not that either, Harry.
Thank you.
That job is occupied and well served for the people of the region by the person I was speaking on the phone with. I will tell you this: I had no interest in doing it, but it had to be done. And look at the results. Look at a budget that's $56 million smaller than it was 2 years ago. Look at the fact that we just delivered an 11.4% property tax decrease to the citizens of Atlantic City. That's a $621 refund on average for the homeowners of Atlantic City. That makes a huge difference to families who live in Atlantic City. Look at the fact that we took the debt that they owed in property tax rebates to the casinos down from $303 million to, half of that, and have gotten that bonded at a good rate in the bonding market that, in fact, the rating agencies have upgraded Atlantic City, that we were able to come to a settlement with the police union that now allows for a much more affordable Atlantic City police force. None of those things would have happened under the leadership of the mayor and the council. Just wouldn't have. And this is not an indictment of them. It's a political reality. And, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And so, I'm hopeful. I heard the lieutenant governor say yesterday that she looks forward to state intervention ending in Atlantic City. So do I. Never wanted to be there in the first place. But let's make sure the job is done. And, we need to settle some things with the fire department in Atlantic City and make sure that we get everything on the right track. The payment in lieu of taxes is working for the casinos and working for the city. And we now have the city on a budgetary trajectory where they're going to be able to pay their bills and not have to incur more debt. And by the way, we did it, and I want all your listeners to hear this.
Governor, do me a quick favor. I want to do a quick station identification, and then we'll finish up. We're visiting with Governor Chris Christie for a couple of more minutes. It's Hurley in the morning.
104.1 FM and 1450 AM WPGG Atlantic City. Everything you need.
Governor Christie, continue, please.
We did it, and some of the naysayers, both in the media, mostly in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the political people, all said, "Oh, watch what they're going to do now. They're going to sell the water authority to private interests. They're going to do things that will hurt the long-term interests of Atlantic City. They're going to sell Bader Field, or they're going to do things that we don't want them to do." Well, we did it, and some of the naysayers, both in the media, mostly in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and in the political people, all said, "Oh, watch what they're going to do now. They're going to sell the water authority to private interests. They're going to do things that will hurt the long-term interests of Atlantic City. They're going to sell Bader Field, or they're going to do things that we don't want them to do." Well, we did all of this without doing any of that. And in fact, the water authority is still owned by the city and, by extension, the people of Atlantic City, as is Bader Field. All of this was done without those things going on. And so, the fact is that Senator Chiesa has done an extraordinary job for Atlantic City, and we did what we needed to do to put it in a position where in 2018 can have a great revival. And, Harry, if I win my 6-year fight here in favor of sports gaming at the Supreme Court this spring.
That so many told you was fool's gold, right?
That's right. And now you have most people preparing. 19 other states, by the way, Harry, since January 1st, have introduced sports gaming legislation in their legislatures.
Yep.
And so I think everyone's feeling pretty good about what the Supreme Court will do come this late spring, early summer. And when they do, that will be an enormous help to Atlantic City as well. And so I leave office feeling like I've dedicated so much time and so much energy to Atlantic City. And when I came in, casinos were closing, jobs were being lost, the private sector was running away, the city wasn't safe. When I leave, the city is much safer. We now have the Taj Mahal being converted into Hard Rock. We have Revel being sold and turned around. We have the old Sands site being redeveloped. We have other private sector investors coming in, and we have casino revenues up. We have non-casino revenues up, and I think a new day for Atlantic City. And, you said before about getting credit. I don't expect I'm going to get credit, and you will still have those people, both in my own party and in the other party, who will just, try to take political advantage by taking political cheap shots. They now have the ball in their hands. Let's see how it goes.
Now, I know we got to end in a moment or so, and I realize you've only been unemployed for less than 20 hours and 3 minutes. But
yes.
So I'm not going to accuse you of being a slacker because you're not that.
And as governor, I can't get unemployment insurance, Harry.
This is terrible news. Do you know what you will be doing next, even if you can't say?
I don't. Listen, the ethics laws in this state place significant restrictions on a governor from negotiating for any compensation for work that will be done either when you're governor or work that you'll do after you leave the office. And so I decided just to play it, completely conservatively and not enter into any negotiations with folks going into the last months of my governorship. And so, today is the first time since I've been 15 years old when I took a job at a gas station down the street from my house where I grew up in Livingston that I haven't had a job. I worked my way through college, worked my way through law school, began after the bar exam to immediately get a job at a law firm. And I've had a job for 40 years, Harry. I'm 55 now. So from the time I was 15 until I was 55, I woke up every morning having a job. And so it's a very odd feeling this morning to wake up without a job. But, I'm going to begin working in earnest tomorrow on pursuing a lot of different opportunities that I know are out there. And then when I have an announcement to make, I'll certainly let people who care know about what I'll be doing next. I suspect, Harry, it'll be more of a number of things rather than one thing. I feel like the last two jobs I've had so challenging, so exciting that I don't know if there's just any one job that I could take that would keep me interested and challenged. And so I think I'll probably wind up doing a number of different things and hoping that, I'll find some things in life that are not only financially successful, because we still have two more children, Patrick and Bridget, to put through college, but also are things that I find, personally and professionally satisfying as well. So we'll keep you up to date.
Now, you ran twice in New Jersey, deep, dark blue state of New Jersey, and won twice. You ran for president of the United States. Hard to say what you could follow up, do for an encore, but could you even imagine an elective or an appointed position, whether in the federal government or an elected position at some point? What are your thoughts about that? I know we've got to go soon.
You never say never, Harry. I mean, you never say that, you're going to close the door on anything. I think that I've had the elective job that I wanted the most in being governor of New Jersey, and I loved every minute of it. And as far as the presidency is concerned, I pursued that, and it's a job that I would have loved to have. But, as my oldest son said to me, if we're going to judge your career success or failure about purely on whether you became president of the United States, one of the 44 people who have ever been president, I think we've set our standards a little too high. Your career's been a success. So I would never preclude the chance of running for office again or accepting a position, an appointed position in government. But certainly as I sit here this morning talking to you, I don't have any plans for that, and I don't anticipate that happening in the near future. I expect, as I've said all along, that when I would leave the governorship ultimately, if it wasn't for the presidency, I'd be leaving the governorship and then entering the private sector.
Wow. I'm going to officially name this the final Ask the Governor under the Town Square Media brand. It's extraordinary, and not lost on me, Governor Christie, is the timing. You promised me that we would do a postmortem, exit interview, and that we did this in the 7 o'clock, now into the 8 o'clock hour, literally hours after you left after 2 terms, is not lost on me. And I really appreciate it and you.
Well, Harry, thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. And you're a great public servant as well. You're serving the public of your region extraordinarily well with this show that you put on every morning, not only entertaining people, but informing people. And it's always been a place where I could go to make my case. You ask the questions that need to be asked. You put on the people who opposed me and gave them an opportunity to air their views so that the people of your region who listen to you every morning and count on you for bringing them the news and the information they need to be informed citizens have had the opportunity to do that. And so for me, this has been always a great place for me to come over the last 8 years to be able to make my case. And as governor or any kind of elected official, that's the most you can ask for, is the opportunity to get a fair shot to make your case. And you've always given me that opportunity. You gave it to me this morning. And I'm sorry that we didn't do it while I was still governor, but those last few days were pretty hectic and trying to get everything done. So I thought doing it and having the freedom to do it when I wasn't looking at the clock and saying I have to go and do something else would better serve me to make the case and better serve you and, most importantly, your listeners to have me be able to take it in a more relaxed approach.
Thank you, Governor Christie. And I do want to thank Mary Pat, Andrew, Sarah, Patrick, and Bridget for putting you on loan to us for the last 8 years, because I think you might even want to comment about this because you never boo-hoo, but having your job and being responsible for 9 million people and all kinds of things. And you always used to say, you're not always great every day, but you always have an opportunity to be great. But the sacrifice of not being at certain things, and even if you went to certain things, getting hassled, he took the helicopter. All right, well, I'm governor and I want to see my kid play and get off. I mean, you never, you took all that garbage, and I thank your family for their sacrifice, because it was immense, wasn't it?
It was, and I'll pass it on to them. But we also had a lot of great experiences and opportunities because of this job, and so. Mary Pat and I are the type of parents who always try to relate to our children to see the glass as half full, not half empty, to always try to count your blessings and understand that with great opportunity comes great responsibility. And so, one of the things that you didn't mention, but that I enjoyed the most about the governor's speech yesterday was when he turned and acknowledged that both Mary Pat and I set an example for them on how to be good parents in the public spotlight. And it's not an easy thing to do. And Mary Pat and I so much appreciated the governor making that acknowledgement yesterday, that one of the things I've done all along, Harry, and for any number of things things that have happened, there's been 2 or 3 where people have said these were bad optics or embarrassing things. You mentioned one of them, the taking of the helicopter to see my son's baseball game, which we paid for, by the way, which was one of the underreported parts of the story. Or when, I took Mary Pat and the kids to Disney World in 2010 after we had not had a vacation for the entire first year of the administration, and we had a snowstorm, and the lieutenant governor was tending to her terminally ill father out of state. So Steve Sweeney had to be in charge. That became a big kerfuffle. And then finally, this past July, when Smitty Prieto closed down the state government, and I told people for weeks beforehand that my family and my children had planned an event for 4th of July, and that I was going to be on the beach there, whether or not the government stayed open or not. I wasn't going to allow them to hold my family hostage. Each one of those things, Harry, remember, were examples of me and Mary Pat putting our family first. And, people say all the time in public life that they want folks in public office who are real people and not actors and who will put their family truly first. But then when you do that, if they don't like the optics at the moment, they decide to take off after you. I make no apologies for putting my family first, because today, Harry, after I leave the job, the people who are by my side are my family, the same people who were by my side on the day I took the job. And
these are also not mutually exclusive, Governor. You can put your family first and not cheat your state, your responsibilities.
Absolutely not. And in fact, none of those things were the case, nor was anybody really saying that that's what was happening. And so, I caution people as they go forward. The Murphys have 4 children as well, same as we do. There's going to be, times where their attention is going to need to be not only on the job every day, which I'm confident it will be, but also on their children and on their family. And if you really want real people to take these jobs, and not people who have fake for show families, but people who actually really engage with their family, I think people should, take a deep breath and give those people a chance to be parents. And I think the acknowledgement by the governor yesterday of that in his speech was very gracious and very, very appreciated by both me and Mary Pat.
I thought it was a beautiful comment, and you could tell it was a sincere comment coming from a dad who knows what he's about to get into with having children and the whole spotlight and everything. You had a helicopter flying over, your personal time with your family. That's why that you in the beach chair got morphed and, whatever you call that, photoshopped. You were in every scene in the history of the world,
Yep.
Yeah, because a helicopter was following your every move.
Yeah, well, listen, that's part of what they need to get used to, and what the Murphys will have to get used to in terms of the new media and what they believe is acceptable. And the worst part of that whole episode, Harry, was that that beach that day and the way it looked at Island Beach State Park is the way it looks every day. Whether Island Beach State Park is completely sold out, which it is most weekends in New Jersey, or whether it was closed, as it was that day, because no one is allowed within a mile on either side of the governor's house. And so the emptiness of that beach and the awful disservice that the media did with that was to make it seem like it only looked that open and spacious because it was the rest of the beach was closed.
Right. Nobody else could go on the beach, but you could.
Right. And the fact is that 99.9% of the beaches in New Jersey were open. And you know that, living in a shore community, they were all open. And so that's kind of part of what you need to put up with, and it's difficult as a family to deal with those things. But unfortunately, that is what the media has morphed public life into these days of, Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and instant gratification and little analysis and even less at times, unfortunately, truth. And we've seen that. So, those things are disappointing parts of the job. But this morning I sit here with my family knowing that we did the very best we could for 8 years as a family, and that we're still intact and together as a family after those 8 years, and that's incredibly gratifying.
I know I pushed my luck here, but if I could just ask you to squeeze in, because I think people would want to know this. We always want sort of an optic, a window into what kind of former governor will Chris Christie be? We think about our former presidents, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush. They made pledges to not talk about. George H.W. Bush started and said, I will not say anything negative about, the president for at least a year, because I want, in fairness, and he is a good man, as you know. He didn't want, to be undermining the sitting president. Nobody seems to mind that, anymore, sitting governors or sitting presidents. It's all good now, especially when they're Republican, that you just trash them in real time, undermine them in every way possible. But no bad things were said. What kind of former governor do you plan on being in terms of if something's going on that you just totally disagree with? Do you bite your tongue? Will you be occasionally heard from? I mean, you are no wilting violet. No one will ever accuse you of, shrinking.
No, I'm sure.
But what do you have an idea of what kind of former governor you intend to be?
Yeah, I've said that I'm not going to be the kind of guy who's going to be sitting and shooting from the peanut gallery. I know what it's like to be in the battle, and I don't think it's necessarily helpful for folks who've had the job to be shooting publicly. Now, listen, I think that President Bush 41 had it right. I think for the first year, at a minimum, you got to keep your powder dry, and if you've got something to say that you disagree with, you should be doing that privately. After that, if you want to try to make some commentary publicly, you can. I think it's acceptable to do it then. But I'm not going to be the kind of guy who's going to be sitting by the phone waiting for some member of the media to call me to take a shot at the guy who's trying to do the job now. I don't think that's helpful or useful. If I have deep philosophical differences, I'll certainly raise them. But I don't think you'll expect to hear from me on those issues, at least for the first year. And I think the governor deserves the opportunity to be able to get his administration off the ground and hopefully doing good things. And if he does that, as we said at the top of this, that'll be good for me and my family, you and your family, and all the families of New Jersey. And we have to hope for the best for him. And that's the way I'm going to approach it. I don't intend to be, sitting on the sidelines being a perpetual critic. Hopefully I will have things that will be occupying my time that will make it more difficult for me to do that. And also, much more importantly, I think that's the right way to conduct yourself as a former office holder.
Governor Christie, on behalf of our Town Square Media WPG listeners, thank you for always keeping your word to us. I've enjoyed our partnership of the past 8 years, and actually it started before that when you were a candidate. So we've been together for about a decade now, maybe a little more, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Harry, I do as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity this morning, and thank you for your friendship and your honesty over the last decade. It's been one of the truly delightful parts of this experience, and on behalf of me and Mary Pat, we both say thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Be well.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, sir. Governor Chris Christie, 18 minutes past the hour. We'll break. We'll be back in just a few minutes.